For this next demo, I'm working with yellow and violet, which of course are complementary colors on the color wheel. And so we're graduating to these more complex drawings now. When I get started on this one, I'm going to put it right here, so it'll, juxtapose this monochromatic sphere. And like I said, my other 4 studies will be on the rest of this paper, and you can't see all of the paper, but I've gridded it all out so that it'll be equally these, 6 spheres that are about the same size. Now, the thing to keep in mind as I'm going to start this one is that I'm not going to delineate the sphere with white. I'm actually going to delineate it with yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm really primarily just going to be working with yellow and violet, and I'm going to use a teensy bit of black for the richest, deepest part of the shadow, and I'm going to use a teensy bit of white for that highlight, but I'm only going to do that at the very end. And I'm drawing a different sphere. I want to, have a little bit of variety, a little bit of difference here. So I'm drawing the middle option for our spheres. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to leave room for that shadow to be about right here in the composition. And you can also play around with scale of these spheres, so you can make a couple of them smaller and a couple of them larger. So you have a few different kind of fun ways to, play around compositionally with that. And so now that I've delineated the sphere, I'm going to go ahead and begin to delineate the lighter areas with yellow, especially this, kind of very strongly highlighted area here. And I'll be blending these, but I'll do the same thing that I did before, where I will go back into the sphere and I'll use some of that pastel and I'll leave it raw and won't blend it, because I do really enjoy that. And then I'm adding some of the yellow back here for, of course, that kind of, that back lit area that is reflecting the light off of that surface that the sphere is sitting on. Okay, so that is my yellow. Let me go ahead and blend all that together using my finger initially, but I'll go back in and use the blending stump when I need it. And carrying those areas of density of the yellow into the area where I know I'm going to be incorporating that violet. So I can already begin to see that tonal shift, that tonal transition. But of course, that is not in fact a highlight, it is a shadow, as we will see momentarily. Now, in addition to your white eraser, you're also welcome to use your art gum eraser. So I'm going to go ahead and incorporate that into our studio practice at this point. It's a good time to begin using it. The art gum is great. It really picks up a lot of material. And then for the back, for the little shaded area here, I'm going to go ahead and incorporate that complementary. So it should be a really rich, bold violet where the shadow is deepest, and then it'll blend in with the yellow. And what I'll do in the end is I'm going to go back and make sure that there's a really bright sliver of yellow right at the bottom there where that reflected highlight is the brightest. So I'll go ahead and blend this with my finger as well. I don't need to get in there with a blending stump yet, but I will towards the end. I want that violet to be nice and bright in the middle. I don't want it to really blend until we get to these, you know, kind of edges here. So going ahead and just making sure that that's super bright in the middle there, and letting that begin to blend up into the yellow. Now this is the same with the black and white, where the violet is such a deeper, richer color, so it's really going to take over the yellow really quickly, so you don't need to do a whole lot to make that begin to happen. And so I would be super duper careful when you get to these, you know, blended areas where you really don't want too much violet, where you really want that yellow to sing and be really, really bright. Of course, making sure that you leave that, you know, kind of tonally really rich violet area. Now, if you're doing this with colored pencil, of course, you're going to be working with line. And so in this case, it's the accumulation of line and the layering of line in a way that can begin to speak to, you know, kind of that sense of volume, working with line to define the form of the sphere, to make it, you know, appear as a three-dimensional shape, the same way that we're blending colors now. So, and you want to be prioritizing that layering of colors regardless of whether you're using colored pencil and line or whether you are blending. And so really starting with clean fingers and working up to these really subtle shifts, and then working back down into that shadowy area of the sphere. And I'm feeling pretty good about this, so I'm going to define the shadow as well. I haven't laid that down yet, but that is going to be a heavy violet, mostly violet. There will be a teensy bit of yellow. And that sphere comes out, or that shadow comes out around here, and it's darkest and richest here and along here. And so notice how as I'm laying down that violet, I'm leaving that little bright speck of yellow on the back of the sphere. I'm really leaving that alone. I want to maintain that. And then the shadow in this example kind of diffuses out along the edge, so I'm gonna go ahead and represent that as well in my version. Get that, you know, kind of a subtle amount of that violet all the way up to there. I can still use my finger here. I don't need the blending stump yet. Tonally, it's a little bit lighter on that side, so I'll let that stay like that. And then kind of let that diffused shadow be just kind of blended out from the core. And then go ahead and add that little tiny bit of black into there to give us that really rich, deeper area of the shadow. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of black along that edge inside the sphere as well. Now, because our blending stump has black on it, I can use it, and especially because the previous color I'd been using was red, I don't feel super nervous about messing up my blending stump. Or like, you know, incorporating a color that isn't already, you know, kind of in the composition, because violet is right next to red on the color wheel. So I'm not super worried. Now notice how I really only used a tiny bit of black in this sphere. You really do not need a lot, because now we're working with two colors, and so we really don't need a lot of black to convey that message, to get that point across visually. So I'm barely using any. Now in this example, there's kind of a much bigger highlight here, but what I want you guys to do is really try to pin that highlight down to something smaller, kind of like what we had in our first example. I don't want you to use too much white. Good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and define this, you know, kind of crisp white, or I'm sorry, crisp yellow edge. Along that bottom there. Just kind of blending into that yellow line so that it feels like part of the sphere overall. And so that the sphere itself really feels grounded I'm gonna add like a tiny bit more. Value down there. Because what I'm ultimately also going for is I really want the sphere to feel like it is sitting on the surface that it's on. I don't want it to feel like it's not, like that it's just kind of floating above that surface. And then this is again the case where I think I'm going to leave some of this pastel raw because it has so much character and kind of visual flavor in the composition. When you leave just a little bit of it raw, and don't blend it all. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. The one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it outside and blow all of this debris off, and then I'm probably going to go along the edge and use my eraser in the same way that I used it for this sphere.